Let's do this. A little Dirt and Sprague overtime here on YouTube today. David Droegemeier talking Chargers of the LockedOn Chargers podcast at Dro Talk SD on Twitter. Go give him a follow. David, first off, man, thanks for doing this. We obviously have a pretty big, Charger following now in the state of Oregon because of Justin Herbert and how he's going to be in the NFL. I'm curious to get your thoughts on what the offseason and vibes are like going into a year with Jim Harbaugh as opposed to what it's been the last couple of years of Brandon Staley, because it's a welcome change for a lot of people who want to see the Chargers do better. Has it been received the same, and what are the differences we've seen so far in the two coaches?
Yeah, it's been received exceptionally well. I think one thing I can point to is, we do shows at LockedOn Chargers 10.5 months out of the year. We do 5 shows a week. Okay. And at one point in time, we did 15 straight shows on Jim Harbaugh. Okay. And the reason why we did that is because of the outpouring of content that people were just thirsting for. They wanted to know everything that had to do with that coaching search. And then of course, when he got hired, and then honestly, it's just been so refreshing to have an actual leader, an actual adult in the room. Yeah. The Chargers have had first-time head coach after first-time head coach after first-time head coach. The last 3 head coaches that they've had, the Chargers ownership has kind of gone the cheaper route. I think would be accurate to say. It's kind of bitten them in the butt. They just haven't had very much success. I believe it's one playoff win in the last, 6 or 7 years here. So to have somebody who has that pedigree of success at multiple different levels, including his own professional career, I think is something that all Charger fans resonated with. And as far as the offseason is concerned, all the players have bought in as well, because the attendance at voluntary OTAs has been almost 100%. I mean, barring a few people who were dealing with injuries, or prior commitments that couldn't be there, almost everybody's been there, and everybody's raved about the leadership, how the message has been the same from the top, disseminated down through the position coaches, all the way down to the player level. Everything has been in unison. Everything's been the same. And the players have really appreciated that, and the attention to detail that Jim Harbaugh and his coaching staff has really hammered home has really been something that the players have taken to like fish to water.
Well, David, I think that's an interesting part too, to me, because we have a lot more interest in the Chargers here. Our producer, obviously, he's a big Charger fan now. He abandoned the Cowboys because they let him down too much, so he picks Herbert and the Chargers.
I understand that. I live in Texas, so I see that all the time.
But I'm curious. You touched on something there. And if we're wrong, please correct it. Our narrative, I think, outside looking in, feels like really bad owner. Spanos not the greatest reputation, and so we both love Harbaugh. I understand the excitement for it. Dude's won everywhere he goes. Is there still some hesitation of buying all in for people because of Spanos, or is this clearly like, okay, maybe not the best owner, but Harbaugh can get past that problem, and that's not a big deal for them?
Well, I think honestly, this is the turning of the leaf when it comes to talking about the Chargers ownership and Dean Spanos, because like I said before, I mean, I think they were kind of notoriously known as cheap ownership. The guys will, let me go to get a first-time head coach guy. Let me, be a little bit more guarded on what money I'm going to spend on investing and, putting into a stadium before. Obviously, they went to SoFi and things like that. But the only way you're going to get a guy like Jim Harbaugh is, one, you give him the contract that he deserves and that he has earned through his success. And 2, you give him the autonomy and the freedom to be able to make the decisions that he feels like he needs to make. And also with Joe Ortiz coming over from the Ravens, I said this on my podcast, he would not come over for any job. Like, he was a very high up executive with the Baltimore Ravens, had been there for 20 years. This guy's not leaving unless he gets a very rare opportunity where ownership is on board, where they're going to allow him to do what he has to do. They're not going to meddle. They're not going to micromanage everything that he decides to do. This is them. This honestly shows, and I think signifies, a continental shift in how they do things, because they're tired of losing. They know that if they want to get the success that they want, they have to open up the checkbook, and they need to go pay for that. And that is with bringing in an established head coach and an executive that, with the Baltimore Ravens, a very successful organization, knows what they're doing and is a winner, a perennial winner, year in and year out. So I think that has really showed a lot of the Chargers fan base that, okay, this ownership is for real. They want to win now. I'm starting to believe it. Obviously, wins have to co-sign those decisions. Obviously, right? This is the NFL. It is a what have you done for me lately league, and the Chargers are coming off of a 5-12 season. They've made some great changes. It looks like they're going to be effective, but they got to rack up the W's before anybody's going to really fully be on board.
Well, and I'm curious to ask you on that, David, because I look at it from the outside looking in. Like I imagine some of this all-in nature has to do with the quarterback that they have. Like you land a guy like that. Like why are we don't want to waste his prime with bad coaches and bad management. Let's make sure we invest to give him a chance to win. It's very split up here, and some of it has to do with your college fandom and who you rooted for. And I feel like there's truths to both sides of it, right? Where he has not been helped. Their defense has been terrible. There's been no run game. The offensive line hasn't been good. While on the other side of the coin, it's he hasn't won a playoff game. He's got to get over the hump. But we just hold quarterbacks to this different standard, right? And that's what you're judged on, is how do you do in those big moments and in those big games. How do Charger fans feel? Like when you're doing a segment, you're getting reaction from listeners. What's the feeling? Is it all in, 75% all in? Are they 50-50 coin toss? How do they feel about Herbert as a franchise quarterback?
Oh, they're absolutely all in on Justin Herbert. They understand the absolute rare talent that he possesses. I think this is a little bit of a WWE kind of, example here. I've seen the commentators and they're talking about a guy named Randy Orton. This guy's 6'5", 275 pounds. They said, if you were to build a WWE superstar from the ground up, it would look like Randy Orton. If you were to build a quarterback from the ground up, it would look like Justin Herbert. 6'6", 245, 250 pounds. An academic Heisman, a guy that has a computer processor, a rocket arm that has the touch and the accuracy to make any throw on the football field. They all know how incredibly talented Justin Herbert is, but they also are not naive to the fact that Justin Herbert has a record of 16-4 when the Chargers defense gives up less than 21 points. Okay. So it's not a individual game. And that's why I cannot stand the wins or a QB stat. No, they're not, because it's not an individual game. It is a team game. You need all of the elements working in concert together to win a football game. The Chargers have had a horrible defense, and I mean atrocious. Under Brandon Staley, they've had a bottom 5 defense almost every single year. And Justin Herbert, no matter how many times he brings them back, puts them ahead, all you have to do is go back and watch all the times the defense has crumbled and given up the lead right after Justin Herbert went and got it for him. They also have had no semblance of a running game, which it's really hard to close out games when you can't run the football, when you can't establish that dominance, when you can't close out a football game. You need your running game to be able to do that. And the Chargers offense has been way too one-dimensional. It's really easy to play defense when you can just put a roof over the coverage and dare the quarterback to make these very, very tight window throws when there's just no threat of the running game. That's going to change now. That's going to change under Jim Harbaugh, because that's what he brings to the table. He's a physical head coach. He wants to establish the running game. You bring in Greg Roman, who all he does is create top 10 rushing attacks throughout his tenure as an offensive coordinator. So this is going to be a much different team. This is not your finessed Chargers football team that you've seen the last 4 or 5 years. This is, I'm going to beat the hell out of you, and I want to make sure you know that you played the Chargers every single time you play them. You're going to be feeling it for a couple of days later.
Well, I think it's interesting, too, because Jim goes back to the NFL after winning a national championship, and it's not really hard to find the links where he clearly identifies success. Yeah. Baltimore. His brother beat him in a Super Bowl. So what do? They go hire the former OC, who he also worked with in San Francisco, and Greg Roman, you mentioned him. And
Stanford.
Yep, and Stanford. The general manager, here we go. He's a Baltimore guy. Their running backs now are Baltimore guys. Like, everything about this team is Jim going, John's still killing it. Let's just do this, and then I'll implement my own stuff. How did the Greg Roman hire land? Because he's kind of a polarizing coordinator in some respect. Obviously, the run game with Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman it's been touted and recognized, but also the passing attack of Greg Roman offenses doesn't seem to be particularly inspiring. I know they drafted Ladd McConkey. We can get into some of what they did in the draft, but just how did it sit with Greg Roman as the OC for Justin Herbert?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I wasn't too happy about it. I was not thrilled when they first announced that move, because when you have a quarterback like Justin Herbert who can make any throw on the football field, you wanted somebody with a little bit more of an established pedigree. But the other side of the token is, after I let it resonate and let it sit for a little bit, is They've had that. They've had the offensive coordinator that has, taken the deep shots and have tried to have a diverse passing attack. It hasn't worked. When you look at the teams that are perennially in the playoffs every year, they have a balanced attack. And the other thing I would say, just going up against Greg Roman and understanding the deficiencies in the passing concepts is he's never had a quarterback like Justin Herbert. Okay. And also I think another guy that helps kind of, put those fears at ease a little bit is they have Mark Trestman. That's going to be a part of their offensive staff as well. And if you know that name, this guy is an innovator of offensive football, both in the CFL and in the NFL. He's done a lot of very, very good things in this league. So I feel like him partnering up with Marcus Brady, who's their passing game coordinator, will help be able to have a more diverse attack. And also just listening to Greg Roman talk, like he understands who he has at quarterback. But he also knows that the best way to get the most out of Justin Herbert is to have a diverse rushing attack that defenses have to plan for, that they have to account for. They have to make sure that they can't just play the, back coverage. They're going to have to stack the box every once in a while, and then they're going to get hurt with play action. So when you can run the football, you can do a lot more things on offense, and you can be a lot more effective because of that. So I think after taking all of that information into account, I hope the passing concepts are a little bit more diverse. I hope that they're able to utilize Justin Herbert's arm, but I also understand that an effective rushing attack is going to make everything that the Chargers do a lot more dangerous on offense.
I agree with you completely on that point. And on the passing game, I'm curious to ask you about the wide receiver position. I feel like Mike Williams and Keenan Allen have been staples there for 25 years. It feels like.
It feels that way.
And now you're starting over a little bit, right? I mean, back-to-back years with an early draft pick spent on a wide receiver. How do we feel about that group? What are the reports about McConkey? And just, how are we looking at wide receiver going into the year?
Yeah, wide receiver is definitely going to be a little bit of a learning curve. I mean, there's a lot of bodies in that room. The Chargers, I think, have 11 or 12 guys that are vying for probably 5 or 6 spots, depending on how many receivers that they want to take. But as far as Ladd McConkey's concerned, they're raving about him. They're saying he's like a 4 or 5 year vet with the way that he runs routes. Like there's a crispness to it that you can just sense. Like this guy doesn't run routes like a rookie. Like this guy understands leverages. He understands how to get off the ball, like the timing and tempo. Like this guy is really precise. Like he understands he's going to win. He's able to create separation in the early, the intermediate, and the deep parts of the field. So I feel like he's going to be a guy that's going to really kick off. We got to see what DJ Chark's going to bring to the table. I think this is a guy who's coming off of probably a little bit of a down year, but also, pay attention to who he had at quarterback too. I don't think it was all on him. I feel like he can still get open. I think for Quentin Johnston, he has to obviously get the hands taken care of. That's the big thing. You got to make sure you catch the football, but I don't feel like he was utilized the correct way last year. They sent him on way too many deep routes. When you watch him at TCU, he is all about run after catch. Get him the ball where he has a runway. Let him go out there and create. Let him turn into a running back when he gets the ball in his hands. Yeah, you want to send him deep on occasion because he has the frame and he has the speed to be able to do so. But I feel like putting him on at that, that Z receiver where you can move him around, get him in motion, kind of, get the bigger body corners off of him and get him a runway, I think is a way more effective way to utilize what he does well. And then, they went with guys in the draft had a little bit more of a blocking pedigree. Cornelius Johnson that came out of Michigan, one of the best blocking wide receivers in the NFL or in all of college football last year. Obviously won a national championship with Jim. And then of course, Brendan Rice, who got drafted way later than a lot of people I think were expecting. He has a big chip on his shoulder. We'll see if he's going to be able to make the football team, but I'm excited to see what this young group is going to be. For too long for the Chargers, it was all about big, tall guys with, not great speed. You look at this Chargers receiving core and these guys can fly. A lot of them are 4-3 guys and they can absolutely take the top off of defense. So I'm excited to see what they're going to be and how they're going to be used.
And I also think too, an important thing for Charger fans too is seeing what Harbaugh was at San Francisco. Had some good playmakers, but also it's an important thing for those guys to block. It's massive. It's no different than what the Niners have now, where Shanahan demands his receivers to be good blockers. We know that Harbaugh also operates in the same kind of stuff. I do want to ask you, I'm curious about the receiver stuff. The Johnston one, I thought he was going to have a monster year. I loved him at TCU. I agree with you. The way that they used him was a little questionable. McConkey sounds like he's awesome. Herbert, we all see it. Like we get people that are anti-Herbert up here, and I don't know how to convey it other than like, can't you just see this? Can't you just see what this guy is? But he's had some struggles here and there. What is your criticisms of Justin Herbert? What is something that when you watch Justin Herbert, yeah, he's an all-world guy. He's got the arm. He's got the build, all that. He's a brainiac. What is something that Justin Herbert, in your estimation, needs to be better at for this team to also take that next step?
I think, honestly, there's not a lot of flaws in his game. I mean, first and foremost. But I think the one thing that comes to my mind is sometimes he needs to use his legs a little bit more. Like, he needs to understand the athlete that he is. Like, this guy can run. Like, he can run. He can run people over. He can juke people out. Just watch the clip that he did to Max Crosby last year. He did him dirty. I mean, he was out in the open field and literally juked him out of his shoes. Like, he fell on the ground. Like, that's the type of capability that Justin Herbert has with his legs. Sometimes he wants to stay in the pocket a little bit too long. And, you know, he's strong enough to do that. He has really good pocket presence. He can move around. He can extend plays, but don't be afraid to tuck it and run. Go get an extra first down. Go extend a drive. Like, don't be afraid to go do that. Utilize that part of your game. And I think under Greg Roman, there will be a couple more design runs in there for him. Obviously, you don't want to do it all the time because, you know, he's had some injuries throughout the beginning part of his career. But if he sees an avenue, he sees a lane, like, go take off, Justin. You can do it. Like, you are capable of doing that. Trust your legs. And then I think the second thing would be, don't be afraid to be a little vocal. Talk a little bit of trash. Have a little bit of swagger. Like, you are that dude. You are that good. Like, don't be afraid to show some emotion. I think some of the best athletes in the NFL and across sports for that matter are guys that aren't afraid to have fun and aren't afraid to go and get in somebody's face and be a little vocal. I mean, like they say in other events, he talks trash. Why not on the football field? Like, I think a lot of people would really appreciate that. It's like seeing that side of him. And I think, you know, listening to his press conferences this offseason, he is starting to come out of his shell a little bit more. He is starting to become more of that leader. And I think part of that is Jim Harbaugh pushing him to come out of his shell more and be that guy because he has that talent.
The other big part of his success is going to be the offensive line, which has been hot and cold at times in his NFL career. Is this the best group that he's ever had in front of him? I know they addressed it with a top 10 pick, but then you lose a Pro Bowl center to retirement. How are they feeling about the offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask Jim Harbaugh, he feels great about it. He says they're going to be a top offensive line in the NFL. Obviously, a coach is supposed to say that, but I think there's a couple of question marks there. I think, obviously, on the bookends, you love what you have with Rashawn Slater at left tackle. I mean, he is a Pro Bowl. He's a all-pro type guy. The guy's phenomenal. I think we need to see a bounce back from Zion Johnson at left guard. I mean, he looks like an animal. He looks like an absolute monster. Like, he's gigantic. I mean, you can tell he's really put some work in the weight room. Like, he's not just big. Like, he's yoked. Like, so I'm excited to see what that does. Bradley Bozeman, I think, is fit for this scheme at center. You know, this is going to be a lot more of a rushing team. And I think offensive linemen, if you were to ask them, they would much prefer to run block. They want to go forward. They don't want to be going backwards and having to catch guys. They want to establish dominance. They want to run through people. They want to wreck shop. And I think they're going to be doing that a lot more. And when you're going forward and you're getting more, more yards, that's going to open up things when you do pass the ball and make it a lot easier when you do have to pass protect because of that threat of the rushing attack. So I think we have to see what Joe Alt's going to be. Obviously, the consensus best offensive lineman in the draft, in my opinion. I think he was truly phenomenal, but he hasn't played a single snap on the right side. I mean, he really only played a couple of unbalanced looks when he was at Notre Dame. So we have to see what that transition is going to be like. And he's going to be tested right away because the Chargers are playing the Raiders. And guess who lines up on that side? Max Crosby. So it's going to be out of the frying pan and into the fire right away. I don't think they're going to put him one-on-one too many times. I'm sure they'll have some help on that side for him. Just, get his career started on the right foot. Obviously, there's going to be times where he's going to have to go one-on-one, but I think that offensive line, just from left to right, I think it is one of the stronger units in the NFL. I think it'll take a little time for them to build that chemistry and get that kind of, unspoken communication. But I do feel very confident in what they're going to be able to do this year.
I think what I love the most about Harbaugh, because it felt like for a long time he knew. I think we had talked about this during the college football season of it's the Chargers. It's the most obvious job. Staley's a bum. Like, he's blowing games. He's got Herbert. Like, that's where you go. and it lined up that way. I thought it was interesting he chose them because not only does he get a quarterback, but he's choosing the division with Patrick Mahomes. That's not always a decision I think every coach wants to make, but he's bringing it on. What is your read of the division? We know the Chiefs reign supreme. They obviously are the champs, but what's the read and how you think the Chargers are going to fit in here? Broncos, Raiders, them, Kansas City. How do you view the AFC West right now?
Yeah, I think it's two teams that are probably going to be vying for the top of the division. I'm not ready to say the Chargers are going to challenge them quite yet. I think they need a little bit of time. But I think the Raiders are in flux. They don't know who's going to be at quarterback. They made some very questionable decisions in the draft, like they always do. It seems like every year they have who the hell is a Delmar Glaze? Like, a pick that they took in the third round, like that nobody's heard of. And then the Broncos, again, having a rookie quarterback that they're trying to bring along and see who they're going to be. I feel like the Chargers are in prime position to do very, very well this year. I feel like they'll be in contention for a playoff spot. I think you look at their schedule, they have some soft spots there. They have some ability to be able to put themselves in position. Obviously, we have to see it. I mean, that's the end all be all there. But I do feel like they're going to be much, much more competitive. And with the rushing attack that I feel like they're going to have, their game is going to be able to travel in the elements a lot better than before.
Yeah, that's the last one I got for you, Dave, and we'll let you go. I mean, you mentioned kind of the expectations for the year. If I tell you this is a successful season for the Chargers, is it making the playoffs, winning a playoff game, divisional round? Like, what does a successful year look like? Because there are a lot of new faces. There's a lot of guys gone. It's a new head coach. So there's a lot of newness there, and you're in the same division with Mahomes. So playoffs and win a game, what's a successful year for the Chargers?
I mean, if you ask Jim Harbaugh, he said the expectations are sky high. Like, I want them to be high. If you're afraid of expectations, then you're afraid to compete. I mean, I honestly believe that. For me, I've said this is an 11-win team. I feel very confident that they can get there. Obviously, you always lose games every year that you feel like you should win. And, there's 3-4 months before the season starts. So we just don't know what the teams are going to look like at this point in time. There's way too many things that can change here. But for me personally, I feel like it's making it to the playoffs. And I know that's crazy to say after a 5-win team, but when you bring in a head coach like Jim Harbaugh, a guy that has had immediate success, went to 3 straight NFC championship games the first time he was a head coach in the NFL, the expectations are there. And so I feel like, to me, that's what I expect. I'm not going to say a playoff win, but I expect to see them in the playoffs at the very least. For me, that is my expectations. And I would say that that's probably shared by a lot of Charger fans as well. At least a plus 500 record. But to me, it's playoffs.
Well, and to your point about Harbaugh, man, he has won everywhere he's gone, and this is the best quarterback that he's ever had. I don't think there's really a big debate about that. So expectations are sky high. I love it. David Droegemeier, go check him out. Dro Talk SD on Twitter and the LockedOn Chargers podcast. Thanks so much for the time in Portland, man. I'm sure we got a lot of people who would jump on the pod, curious about what's going on with Herbert down there. So thanks for the time up here in Portland, man.
Hey, very much appreciate you guys reaching out to get me on, and I'd love to come on anytime that you need it.